The Someone You Should Know podcast with Rick Anthony, sponsored by Summarize. Repurpose podcasts, webinars, and interviews for social media, websites, and email with the help of AI, all thanks to the help of Summarize. Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. It's author time once again on the Someone You Should Know podcast. With me this time is an award-winning author who runs the gamut from self-help to nonfiction books. She's also a fellow podcaster and even has an interesting story about riding a bike across America. Will you please welcome my new friend, Teri M. Brown. How you doing, darling?
Doing great. How are you today?
I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. I was reading your bio, and it's funny how you and my daughter kind of paralleled. My daughter, Shauna, both raised on an Air Force base, went to college, and one degree was not enough. Being a military brat growing up there, what do you remember most about your dad's military career?
You know, my dad got out of the military when I was pretty young, so I don't have a lot of memories. I just know that it shaped everything I thought about the United States. My dad was the most patriotic man that you will ever meet. And I knew from a young child that, you know, you said the Pledge of Allegiance and you crossed your heart and you didn't wear a hat and you had like all of those things. And it mattered to my dad. My dad never went anywhere without a flag. He loved to restore old cars, and he would go to these car shows, and he was the one that would always have the flag right there with his car. He would go to the beach for a week, and he would plant a flag out there with his big tent. I mean, that was just my dad. So I would say that's the thing that really touched me, was I understood patriotism. In fact, when I hear people who talk as though they don't understand it, I don't understand them. Like I was just brought up that way. Mom tells a story of a time that they went into one of these, like an ABC store or liquor store, and she had me with her, and I was little, maybe 3. And there was the flag because it's a government type building. And I stopped and put my hand over my heart and started repeating the Pledge of Allegiance. And she said, everyone in the store stops and they're doing this, like they've got their hand over their hearts. And she was so embarrassed because it's like the whole place stopped. And there I was, 3 years old, and that's just what it's always been for me.
Very good. Maybe that might lend to why you married your husband, who was a military member for 24 years too. Yeah, that's very good.
So it's in the family. My grandfather served in World War II. My dad was in the military. I've got uncles that were in the military. It's just, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's a very amazing thing to give of yourself that way. To go and do something that I don't have to. Like, I get to sleep peacefully because someone else is out there watching, and I just really appreciate that.
I feel the same way, very much so. I mean, a lot of times I will get upset with individuals who don't pay attention during the national anthem, as far as at a ball game or something like that. I got in one guy's face one time. He was on his phone during the national anthem. I said, man, it's only 90 seconds long. Can you just get off your phone for 90 seconds? And he was like, what do you care about? I said, because I stood plenty of retreat ceremonies, and I know what that flag's all about. I did 20 years in the Air Force, and I'm very, very proud of all my veterans. Anytime I see a veteran on the street or whatever like that, I'll stop and say thank you. And and people do that to my husband all the time, and it warms his heart, because he put 25 years of his life into that. So me too, and that's just, I'm very, very proud veteran. And anytime we have any veterans on my podcast, I do my very best to have as many veterans on to help spread the message as far as that goes. Now let's just step back here and actually start talking about your writing career. In your formative years, what led you down the path to becoming a writer?
I started out as a little girl that I said that I wanted to be 3 things. I wanted to be an author, I wanted to be an Olympic ice skater, and I wanted to be a brain surgeon. So I'm not positive that I really understood what I wanted to be, because, for instance, brain surgeon, I don't like the sight of blood. That was never going to be a thing. And in terms of an Olympic ice skater, I'm probably one of the klutziest people that you've ever met. So ice skating wasn't going to be it. But I think I said I wanted to be an author because I loved books. I loved books. I was the kid that got caught underneath the covers with the flashlight in the middle of the night reading. My mom, as I grew older, she would say, go outside and play. Just go outside and play. So when she wasn't looking, I'd put my book out on the window ledge, go outside, grab my book and climb a tree and finish reading because I loved books. So I think it was the love of books. I thought I want to do that too. Then though, school kind of happened. My parents had zero desire to pay for a degree in which I didn't come out with a job that was going to make money. And that's the way they felt about being an author. So instead, I got 2 majors, 2 minors, and have never used any of them for an actual paying job. So I'm not sure that they got what they wanted. So I have a degree in childhood education, and I've never taught public school. I have a degree in psychology, and I've never used it directly. I think I've used it a lot in my writing, but I've never used it directly. I have a minor in sociology and a minor in math. And it's because I didn't know what I wanted. So I just kept taking classes and all of these things kept accumulating. And I finally had to stop going to school. I got married. I had children. I got divorced. And when I got divorced, I needed to figure out something that I could do. And I started writing for small businesses. And this would have been I guess I started that probably around 1999, 2000. Okay. The internet at this point is now becoming something that people can have. It was still dial-up. I still had the noises going on, but people were starting to have the internet, and more companies were looking to put things on the internet. They needed stuff on their website, and they recognized that just because they knew how to sell a widget didn't mean that they knew how to write about it. And I very quickly found a niche with small businesses, and I started writing website content and even emails, like email campaigns or newsletters or things that they just didn't feel that they could do. And that's where my writing career started.
That's amazing. I think it was really neat because you covered the gamut of different things that you wrote about. I mean, you wrote about real estate. You wrote about finance. Yeah.
I actually helped a chocolate company. I helped a woman who made these, they were called baby diaper cakes, where you take all of the baby diapers and you turn it into what looks like a cute cake, and they sell them for baby showers. Okay, so I wrote stuff for a lady that did that. So yeah, it was a wide gamut. And one of the things that really appealed to me about that is I get bored very easily.
Really?
And so if I wrote about real estate over and over and over and over and over and over, pretty soon I wouldn't be enjoying myself. So I loved taking on a new challenge. If I didn't know about it, it was like fantastic. Now I can dive into research, learn all about this, write stuff for them. And I felt like I was continuing to learn. So in a lot of ways, I have many other degrees that I didn't get any certificates for.
There you go. I like that. I really do. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Real good. Now, as far as you wound up winning the Eric Hoffman Book Award, and you're a finalist for the USA Best Books Award. Pretty validating things as far as that goes. Makes you realize that you are doing something. How did these accolades give you the confidence to make the transition from nonfiction to fiction?
So, what's interesting is the fiction books that I wrote, they were kind of contracted. It was, hey, we need someone who can write about XYZ. Will you do that? And it was a good way for me to kind of break in and see what it was all about. But it didn't bring me any fame, and it didn't really do a whole lot for me, except that maybe I got some other business. They would see that I had an award in writing, and therefore maybe I was somebody who could write on their website. The difference between nonfiction and fiction is significant, because nonfiction, it's pretty much, can you find the facts and can you arrange them in such a way that people will want to read it? And fiction is, do you have this cool idea in your head, and can you get it out on paper, and can you make characters live? And it's very different. At the time, I was living I had remarried and I was living in an emotionally abusive relationship. So this second marriage was not a good choice of mine. And there was no way I could write fiction because when you put your fiction work out into the world, it's like putting your child out into the world. And so if someone doesn't like it, it hurts. And I didn't have a safe place to land at home. So I couldn't write. I had ideas, but I was just terrified. And it wasn't until I got out of that relationship in 2017 that all of a sudden, all of those stories in my head just started like bubbling forth. And I started writing like crazy. And I wrote manuscript after manuscript. The first few were horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were absolutely horrible, but they showed me very valid things like I have that many words in me. I do know how to write a story from beginning to end. And then it was just a matter of learning the craft better.
Very good. We're speaking with Teri M. Brown. We got more with Teri in just a few seconds, but I want to take a moment to say thanks so much for tuning in to the Someone You Should Know podcast. You can find us on the web at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast.com. If you go there, you're going to find our recent news, our archive of more than 170 episodes, and a whole lot more. If you're visiting for the very first time, we invite you to leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Now, according to Buzzsprout, the service that shares us to all the different streaming platforms, we are so very blessed. Thank you so very much. 2,200 cities in 90 countries around the world, and we'd like to salute a couple of them. Benton Harbor, Michigan, Fort Myers, Florida, Louisville, Kentucky, and Kingston, Jamaica. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Someone You Should Know podcast, where it's heard wherever quality streaming audio is available. Hi, it's Rick again for Summarize. Summarize repurposes your content from audio and video into engaging, shareable social posts, email content, summaries, quotes, and more. Hey, it's hard work to create high-quality content from podcasts and video content. Summarize gives you multiple types of content to support your marketing channels, from social media posts and email newsletters to show summaries and a whole lot more. As a matter of fact, if you go there today, you can upload up to 60 minutes for free and find out why I like it so much. Go to summarize.com to learn more. That's SUMMARAIZE.com. Thanks for listening, and now back to our podcast. Thanks again. We're speaking with Teri M. Brown, an author who's got several books out. I want to talk about your very first one, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. It's set in the Ukraine and aims to help the readers understand the current conflict. It's really hard to understand what exactly is going on over there. Can you take a few moments and kind of explain what that book is all about?
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to let people know is this book came out 4 weeks before the current Ukrainian crisis.
Did you have a foresight in it?
People ask me that all the time, like, how did you know? And it was very coincidental, but I don't really believe in coincidences. I just think that this book was meant to come out when it came out. I have it's my daughter's friend who's Ukrainian. And in 2014, she told me this incredible story that was part of her life story. And it was so incredible that my thought was, wow, that should be like a movie or a book. But at this point, I'm still in the bad relationship. So there's no way that I'm writing anything like that. Fast forward, it's now 2018. I'm out of that relationship and I'm going to a writer's retreat. And my now husband, who was then my boyfriend, said, "You've got to write that story." So I tell everyone that I wrote 82,000 words of fiction so I could tell 3 pages of truth. And what I did was I took her story and I did a whole backstory as to how that could have possibly come to be. So there's just a little tiny hint of truth in there. But it starts in 1970 and you follow 3 Ukrainian women, a grandmother, a mother, and the granddaughter. And you see them progress from 1970s to almost present day, and what's happening with them and what's happening with Ukraine, how it goes from being part of the Soviet Union to being independent of the Soviet Union, but still floundering terribly, and then to start actually making some progress until 2014 when Soviet Union, or I guess Russia, when Russia invaded again. Mm-hmm. So they invaded in 2014, and a lot of Americans don't even remember that.
No, I don't, to be honest with you.
Right.
I don't.
Well, they did. They took the Crimean Peninsula, and the friend that I have was visiting here in the United States was unable to go home because of the bombing that was happening in her city.
Wow.
So, and so the book, though I didn't write it so that people understood this current conflict. It helps people understand this current conflict because you get to see the history. You get to see, first of all, that this isn't something new.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't that they woke up one morning and said, oh, we hate each other and now we're going to have a war. This has been going on for generations.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been some really atrocious things that have happened over these years. And my book does not explore all of those, but it does kind of give you just a good basic understanding of, Russia needs a warm port. That's what they want the Crimean Peninsula for. They've been a bully. They constantly are trying to overtake Ukraine. Different areas have been Ukraine and Russia. So there's a whole swath of area where people are kind of both. And so are they Ukrainian or are they Russian? Well, it depends. Like it reminds me of that area between France and Germany that for many years went back and forth.
Right, yes.
The Alsace-Lorraine area. So it's that kind of thing. And so it explains things. It also talks about when the country became free, everyone had this idea that they were immediately going to be like the United States. Like everybody was going to have a home and drive a car. It was going to be fabulous. And what they didn't realize is that after living in the Soviet Union for that many years, there were no leaders. No one had been raised to be a leader. The only leaders they had were former Soviet Union leaders, and those are the people who came to power. And so it was very much like living in the Soviet Union, but not.
Wow, that's incredible.
And so it was that whole thing, and we explore that as well.
Did any of the news outlets pick up on this?
No, not really. Although the book did really well for a debut novel for an unknown like me. And part of the reason is because people were more interested because it was about Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So I got quite a few podcasts and quite a few people doing interviews and things just because, wow, it's at least timely.
Right, yes.
Very
good. Now, the next book you had is An Enemy Like Me. Tell us a little bit about this particular book.
So An Enemy Like Me is World War II genre, but it's very different than most World War II historical fiction books. It's very loosely based on my family. We are German American, but have been in the United States for 200 years. My grandfather fought in World War II. He fought in Germany. Very rarely spoke about the war, but one time when I was a teenager, he said to me, I always wondered if the person on the other side of my gun was a cousin. Mm-hmm. And that, wow. So I took that idea and I ran with it. And this book is about a first generation German American. So his parents are from Germany. They moved to the United States. He was born a U.S. citizen. He fights in the war. He believes he's going to fight the Japanese. In his mind, this is an enemy he can get behind. They bombed Pearl Harbor. They look different. They talk different. They eat different. He ends up in Germany. And he realizes he's more like the enemy than he is different from the enemy.
That's interesting.
And we look at that from his point of view, but also from his wife and then his 4-year-old son that's left behind. And we see it both as a 4-year-old and then as an adult man looking back.
Wow. Interesting. Now you've got a more recent book that came out early this year, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap. Is it the same type of historical fiction, or is what's the story of this one?
So it's another historical fiction, and this one is set in the 1890s in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. Maggie is a healer. They're known as granny women in the mountains.
Okay, all right.
Granny women. And they use, I tell everyone, it's like roots and herbs and a little bit of mountain magic. There's this idea that they can do things that other people can't do. They can whisper to a baby in a womb and get it to flip so it's no longer breech. And they can
love it.
And I love that aspect of it because I think there is so much to healing and our brains that we do not understand. There's all these great studies, like you can give someone a placebo and tell them it's a pain pill.
Absolutely,
and their pain lessons, right? Or they've shown that people who are optimistic heal faster from surgeries. Okay, so there's some power, there's something there, and these granny women seem to have the ability to tap into that. And I think maybe it's they believe in themselves and the people who go to them believe in them. And that strong belief between the two creates, I guess it allows your mind to do what our minds are meant to do, which is keep our bodies healthy.
Very good.
So just like...
Has that changed you as far as in writing that? Has that changed the way you perceive things as far as health-wise now?
Yeah, I think what it's done is it's opened me up to there's more than one way to get something done. Mm-hmm. I think modern medicine is wonderful. I would not want to go back to the days of bloodletting. On the other hand, there is a lot to the Eastern medicine idea, the more preventative, the help your body stay calm and less anxious so it can do its job, those kinds of things. And I think that there's a way to marry those two, and we need to come to that conclusion. I love modern medicine, but there's parts of it that I hate, like protocol. This is just what we do, and it doesn't matter who you are or what symptoms. If your symptoms are a little different, we're going to still follow the protocol. And sometimes I think it would be so much better if we could look at the person.
Right, yeah.
And
solve the problem, not treat the symptoms. Exactly, yeah.
Right.
My late wife was that way for a long, long time. It took them a long time for them to diagnose that she had lupus. They just kept on saying, oh, it's psychosomatic, it's in your head, it's probably menstrual related type thing. Next thing you know, they find out she's got an actual blood clot. How did she get the blood clot? Then they do the backstory on it and find out that she's had lupus for years. And ultimately, ultimately, that's what did her in. She had lupus for 21 years before her body just wore out as far as that goes.
Right.
Let's find out where your books are available at. Where are they available?
Everywhere. Amazon. Amazon, of course. Mm-hmm. Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, you can find them. You can also go to my website, which is my name, Teri M. Brown, and Teri with one R. And you can buy them from there. So if you're in the United States, I'll sign a copy and send it to you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And what we'll do is we'll put those links in the show notes. So if you're out driving right now, the show notes will include all of her information, her, all her socials and such. We'll include that down in the show notes. I want to switch gears literally and talk about this tandem bicycle ride that you did across the United States in 2020. Quite an inspiring journey. How did you guys do this?
So it all started with when my now husband and I were dating. I had a really strong need to do something big. I wanted to do an adventure of some kind. I wanted to do something big. And my thought was I needed to prove to people that I still had worth, that I still had something to give. Okay. And I think it was 14 years in an emotionally abusive relationship will really do that to a person. Wow. So I just felt like I needed to prove something. Mm-hmm. He said to me one day, I've always wanted to ride a bicycle across the United States, ever since 1976, when a group of college kids did it for the bicentennial. And I thought, that's an adventure. So I had no intention of ever marrying again. And I thought, well, I wouldn't have to be married to go on an adventure with someone. And so I said, is this something you really plan to do? Or is it going to stay on your bucket list until you die? And he said, no, I really want to do it. And I said, count me in. In the meantime, we did get married. He tells everyone that he chased me until I caught him. So that's what happened. And then we got married. We started kind of training, but we live on the coast. So training, we're flat here. Everything's flat. The biggest thing we have is the bridge that goes over the waterway. There's nothing. Then COVID hit and everything shut down. And we thought that our trip was over because we had planned to leave in the middle of May. And in March, we just decided we were done. But it felt so horrible that we started looking again and said, what's the latest that we can leave and still make this happen? Because we were going to start in Oregon and we were going to go all the way to the East Coast. And so you have to look at weather and like, can you make it? And so we decided that if we could leave by July 1st, that we would be able to do it. And we left on June 28th. So we barely made it, but we got out and we rode 3,102 miles on a tandem bicycle. So a two-seater, pulling a trailer with all of our gear in it. And we spent a good portion of the time camping. And if we weren't camping, we were in really, really sleazy motels.
Not even a Motel 6. It was a Motel 5, right?
A Motel 4.5. Yeah, I mean, it was. The
light wasn't on.
No, and you probably didn't want it to be on. I mean, it was pretty. But that's where we were. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and it was COVID. Yeah. So you had to really work to find where can you stay and where can you be. So we rode that whole way across, and I tell people that this was huge for me because I am not an athletic person. I had, when he and I started dating, I hadn't been on a bicycle in 40 years. Mm-hmm. So this is not like Teri just went and did something she usually does. Mm-hmm. This was huge for me. So when we got done with this ride and we're coming up, we stopped at the Marine Corps Memorial is where we ended, partially because my husband was in the Marines for 12 and a half years, partially because we were raising money for Toys for Tots, which is a Marines Foundation charity. Yeah. So this seemed like the right place to stop. And we're coming around and up a little hill, which, by the way, always happens. You always end going up. I don't know why that is, but wherever your day is supposed to end, there's an up right at the end of it. But we're going up this little hill, and there was this flag, and my husband said, "Do you see the flag?" Yes. He said, "That's the flag on the memorial." And I started to sob. And I'm crying, and then I'm laughing, and then I'm crying and laughing, and it went back and forth because I had done it. And I realized in that moment that I could do anything I put my mind to, anything. And what was it that I wanted to do? And it was at that time that I determined I want to be an author. And that's what started me taking manuscripts that had never seen the light of day, that no one had ever seen, and turning it into something.
Very good. I got an idea for a new book.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Based on this bicycle journey, say, my 3,000-mile bike journey. Chapter 1, the right seat.
Right seat. So I actually kept a blog the whole way across. Yeah. And people can find that on my website.
Oh, good.
So head to my website. Under the About section, you'll see a little tab. It's called Team DBA for Double Butted Adventures.
Double Butted Adventures. I love it.
Yeah. And I kept a blog the whole way across, but also during some of the training. And one of them was about finding a seat. Trust me.
I was going to say,
finding a seat. And for a woman in particular, men have an easier time. Their sit bones are a little different, and it's just a little easier. Women have a much harder time. I think I went through 7 or 8 before I finally found one that I thought I could potentially make it across the United States.
The thing is, you're not doing this at the age of 20. You're doing this in your 50s,
Yes.
And it's quite different as far as that goes, Even myself, we bought a bike, and I'm realizing the seat is just not right.
Yeah. So you have to and not only that, but which way you sit. Do you lean forward? Are you more upright?
Yeah, exactly.
Because upright in a seat feels very different. And so you might need different seats for different bikes, depending on how your weight is distributed. So,
Now you were talking about the fact that you raised money for Toys for Tots. Get this, $34,000.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Isn't that crazy? So our goal had been, my husband is big into the Toys for Tots here in our county. In fact, there's 2 counties that have they're together in a campaign. And we always run short of bicycles. Kids want bikes for Christmas, and we don't get enough bikes, and we don't get enough money to buy the bikes.
Right, yeah.
And so we decided we're going on this big bicycle trip. We want to have enough bicycles that every kid in these 2 counties that ask for a bicycle get one. That was the original goal. And as it turns out, every kid got a bicycle, and every organization that asked for help with children got help. There wasn't one child in these 2 counties that asked for help through the Toys for Tots Foundation that did not get help. And it just... it was a fabulous, it made the ride, it made the year, it made Christmas, it made everything.
I think that is outstanding. You deserve a round of applause. Congratulations to you and your husband. Give your husband some love. What's his name?
His name's Bruce. Bruce Brown. He's a fabulous guy.
Bruce, we love you. We love you there, Bruce. Yeah. Awesome. Very good. Now let's talk about another facet of your life. You got so many jewels in your crown. Let's talk about another part of it. It's called The Writer's Lounge. It's your podcast. Tell us about what we're going to link to it, by the way. So when anyone hits that link, what are they going to hear?
Okay, so the Writers Lounge is the one that I guest host. Online for Authors is the one that I host.
Oh, Online for Authors. Okay, very good. You got two podcasts?
So there's two.
Two degrees.
There's two.
How many degrees? How many books? How many podcasts? Good Lord.
I don't stop. I'm one of those people. So I started the Writers Lounge is actually Tom Riddell. Uh-huh. He is the host, and I was a guest on with him right after Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, and he asked me if I'd start guesting with him.
Okay.
And so that's been a wonderful way for me to kind of to jump in and see what it's all about. Mm-hmm. In May of last year, Online for Authors has been around. Jennifer had this show. She started to kind of burn out. She was tired. She asked if I wanted to be a guest host for a while. So I did that for a few months. And then she said, Teri, I've got to stop. I'm just going to stop. Do you want to take over the podcast? And so I did. And starting January 1st, the podcast has now been all mine. And once a week, I talk with an author about one of their books. I also do some live things. And I also talk with people to talk about the writing craft. So maybe we'll learn something about editing, or maybe we'll learn something about, being a podcast guest, why would an author want to do that? And what are the benefits? Those kinds of things.
If someone listening right now is a potential author and would love to reach out to you, how should they do so?
If you go to my website, Teri M. Brown, I have everything in one place to make it easy. There's a tab that says podcast. Click on it. There's just a little form you can fill out. You can just reach out to me on my Gmail or my email, which is Teri@TeriMBrown.com. I try to make things as simple as possible. If you want to find me, you can find me.
Absolutely.
I'm everywhere.
And we'll include it down in the show notes. So if you're listening, all right, so we got it right there. Speaking of show notes, some of your other socials that we can reach out to you. I know you got your website. What other places?
Right. I've got my website. And if you go there, there are all of the icons.
Oh, okay. So very good.
Click. Okay. So that makes it really easy. But Teri M. Brown author is how you usually find me. I think Twitter is the only one that's really different, and it's Teri M. Brown 1. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I did that. I think it happened a long time ago, and then, But anyway, I never tried to change it.
No problem. Taking a look forward through the summer and through the rest of 2024, what can we be expecting from you? You're going to be more podcasting, obviously, more books on the way, maybe?
Yeah. So I am writing one right now, which is so different than anything I've written before. I tell people that I'm either really, really ahead of my times, or I'm committing author suicide. So we'll see what it is. I've gone from historical fiction to this is a modern day comedy, one point of view, and it's about a woman who's going through menopause, and she's recently separated, and she's back on the dating scene, and it's all of the just crazy that happens with the hot flashes and the weight gain and the memory losses and all of the things. And every time I bring it up to women, all I have to do is say it's a comedy about a woman going through menopause, and everyone starts to laugh. So I'm hoping that I have found a little niche here. The story came about because as a little girl, I read a book called Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume.
I know it. I know it very well. Yes, yes.
And they turned it into a movie recently. Yes. Well, while they were turning it into a movie, I read an article or an interview or something, and my mind went to, I wonder what ever happened to Margaret. And the answer that immediately came to me was she now goes by Peg, and she's going through menopause. And immediately this book sprang to life. So that's where I am.
Awesome. Yeah. When it comes out, we'll have to have you back on and talk more about that, too. It's kind of like, does it take over from where the vagina monologues left off, or what?
I know. It's more just a funny look. I mean, there's nothing funny about menopause. No. It can be a real hassle. On the other hand, if you can take a step back, it is kind of funny. Yeah. If it isn't happening to you at the moment, it is kind of humorous. And so it's just a tongue-in-cheek, the sarcastic view of this woman and the whole, she's like I just wrote a scene where she's getting ready for her first online date, and she spends 3 hours figuring out what she's going to wear so she makes the right impression. And 20 minutes before she leaves the house, she has a hot flash, soaks everything, and has to change her clothes very quickly and throw her hair into a bun because she has no other options. and it's that kind of thing. So it's just
it's reality. It's reality.
It's reality, but it's done from a funny point of view.
Awesome, very good. And husbands have a tendency to face that also too, because they have to deal with it too. As far as
yes, it's kind of like the hide. Do you know when to hide?
Absolutely, absolutely. It used to be PMS, and now it is. We're speaking with Teri M. Brown. It's been an absolute delight having you on the podcast, dear. Thanks so much for being part of our growing Someone You Should Know podcast family. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.